I am so ready to talk about this topic, but I am going to say this. I already know that there's some people in my life that if they're listening to this, they're probably going to think it's about them. And honestly, you know what? If the shoe fits. And welcome back to another episode of The Breakthrough Room. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here, and I hope that you get something from today's episode. If you've been around for a little bit, thank you for your support. If you guys like anything about this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share with your friends because it really helps me out. Now, for today, I am so ready to talk about this topic, but I am going to say this. I already know that there's some people in my life that if they're listening to this, they're probably going to think it's about them. And honestly, you know what? If the shoe fits. I mean, if you think it's about you, then it's probably about you. No, in all seriousness, it's just crazy to me that we live in this cyber social world where we can't share our experiences or worldviews without someone taking that as a direct message to them. That was honestly something I needed to get over when sharing my voice, is not just worrying about people judging the content I put out, but worrying about offending people, particularly people in my life. But I've worked through that, and here we are. And we are going to talk about manipulation. It's funny, in the past couple months, I have really pointed out different forms of manipulation and how it impacts me. And I would say about a year ago, I didn't view manipulation in the same way. So if you're like me and you think of the word manipulation, you probably think of it as something that someone does that's out to get you. They are manipulating you with a malicious intent. That's how I used to think about it. However, as I continued therapy, I realized that there are people who manipulate with malicious intention, 100%. But there are also people who manipulate as a way to cope, or they establish this way of being in order to survive. And when they're manipulating, they're not trying to hurt you. They're really probably just trying to protect themselves or to avoid feeling a certain feeling. This could be someone like who has severe abandonment issues, right? They grew up in a very rough household and had inconsistent care from parents or parent figures. And the only way they learn to receive love is by throwing a tantrum, let's say. So this child grows up and they continue to do tantrums or do tantrum-like behaviors, but in an adult version. So maybe they lash out, maybe they guilt trip, maybe they exaggerate the truth. Maybe they make everything in their life bigger than it really is. Maybe they're always sick and they do these weird things, or maybe they're not weird, but they do these things in excess in order to receive attention or love that they're seeking, because it's just how they were conditioned to operate, how they were conditioned to feel acknowledged. So they're not necessarily trying to hurt you, but they are trying to create a specific outcome that works in their favor, which is that love or attention that they're trying to get, but they're doing that by manipulating your response or your feelings. So it wasn't until I kind of really understood that manipulation isn't all about being a bad person, but it didn't change how it impacted me. So there are two types of manipulations that quite frankly just makes my ass clench. Like I can't. And that is passive aggressiveness and guilt trips. Someone who's passive aggressive or use passive aggressiveness in conversation, especially conflict, they're probably using it to avoid the actual conflict and saying how they really feel. However, in being indirect and dishonest, that can make people feel obligated to do things that they wouldn't actually normally do if they were just upfront, hence manipulation. And like minor examples of manipulation that I truly just cannot stand, and I've recently experienced this in dating, but also just in other areas of my personal life, is when people text you and let's say you don't respond right away, or you don't respond at all for whatever reason. Maybe you got distracted and you forget and whatever. And they text you like, hey, are you live? Or, oh, you're so busy now. Or, oh, you're too busy to talk to me, right? That shit irritates me. And there is nothing more unattractive than a guy doing that. Why is it so hard to just follow up with someone? Why is it hard to give that person the benefit of the doubt, especially if you know them pretty well. Maybe they got caught up in something. Maybe something's going on in their life and they completely forgot. And if you are concerned, if that person is concerned that maybe you're upset with them, just come out and say it. Just be like, hey, haven't heard from you. Are you okay? Are we good? Are you upset with me? Is everything going okay? But instead, it's a very passive aggressive of like, oh, you're alive. You're ignoring me. It's like, shut the fuck up. You have fingers. You could text me. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm already getting revved up about that. So another example of passive aggressiveness that may not actually be perceived as passive aggressiveness at the time. However, I know it is. You see that a lot in romantic relationships where a relationship ends, whether it's serious or not, and there was something that ended the relationship. Maybe there was an argument that ended the relationship, and someone comes back into their life, trying to like say, hey, how's it going? How you been? There's that little elephant of the room that you never really resolved, but they're just going to pretend like it didn't happen. And they're just going to keep giving you all the good memories, saying all the good things so that you never really talk about how it ended. And suddenly you're back where you started. It's very manipulative. That's very avoidant. And it's passive aggressive. Anything in which you avoid being direct, in my consideration, it's passive aggressive. Or the other form of manipulation is guilt tripping. Guilt tripping can be used to avoid discussing feelings or the real issue, just like being passive aggressive. But when you guilt trip someone into doing something, what you're actually doing is you're not respecting that other person's feelings. The person guilt tripping is indirectly saying that other person's feelings are not as important. We're not going to focus on that, but rather we're going to bring it back to the manipulator and whatever the message that they're delivering. And you'll actually hear a lot of guilt trips from parents. That's where I've noticed it a lot, is from parents. You can also see it in multiple different relationships, but I do think parents are probably the most relatable. When you become an adult, you start to have your own feelings and opinions, and you have this identity that is now no longer attached to your parent, and your parent is now another human being. And it's weird. They can't quite handle that dynamic of not being the superhero anymore, but rather you're just another human being who makes mistakes. So what I've noticed is that a lot of parents, in order to avoid accountability, they'll over dramatize what's at hand. So instead of acknowledging that what their adult child is saying that hurt them or crossed a boundary, the parent is now going to redirect that focus, not acknowledge it, and make it so that they're a victim of being such a bad parent. I'm sure somebody knows, if it's not their parent, somebody knows where they have heard someone say, you're making it sound like I'm such a bad mom. You're making it sound like I'm such a bad dad. No, you ate my apple, which disrespected my boundaries because I was going to eat it later and you didn't ask for my permission. So how is eating my apple without permission turning into you're going to hell now? Like, make it make sense. Please, how did we get from A to Z? Like, I don't quite get it. It's quite frankly ridiculous. For me personally, I have recognized that it is extremely triggering when I have people that are trying to guilt trip me or be passive aggressive. And when I say triggering, I mean literally my body goes haywire. My stomach is in knots, my heart is racing, my brain does not stop thinking. And in some cases, I'm pacing around my room, speaking out loud, coming up with all my defenses because I know I need to talk to this person. I cannot handle it. It's more stressful knowing you need to talk to someone who is going to be passive aggressive or guilt trip in the conversation, or is actually doing it, than it is actually being upfront with your feelings. So if any of what I've said is relatable to you and you continue to listen, what I want to share is different ways that I have dealt with it. So first of all, I want to say that there is no absolute right or wrong way to handle it, in my opinion. When you're dealing with people who refuse to be direct with you and try to make you the bad guy in expressing your feelings, assuming you have done everything you can to have healthy communication with this person and resolve issues, assuming you've done all that, at this point, how you choose to handle it after that, whatever makes your life easier, is really up to you. Some people can be very straightforward and address it. They're ready to tackle that war, knowing that they're probably not going to get anywhere, but saying how they feel and calling someone out relieves them stress, right? They can sleep at night. I can do that in certain scenarios. It depends on the person. It depends on the situation. It depends on the conversation and the impact it has on me. And it also depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. Because to be honest with you, if I'm not trying to, this is my mentality, if I'm not trying to resolve our relationship, then I personally don't care to address it. I just prefer to just move on my way. It's not worth my time. But if I am trying to resolve something and continue with our relationship and put more love into this relationship, then yeah, I will address it because it has to be addressed in order for the opportunity for it to be different. So that's kind of my opinion. If I've kind of made up my mind, this is not going anywhere, then I don't bother. I don't need to sleep at night knowing that I called someone out. That doesn't make me feel good. The other option is cutting people out, to be straight up. You just cut people out. I don't necessarily mean you have to cold cut people out, but something I've come to terms with is that I can appreciate people and love people from afar, and they don't need to be close to me. I don't need to be close with everyone that I have good feelings for, because even though I'm cutting someone out, that doesn't mean I have bad feelings for them. What that means is I've outgrown this relationship, this dynamic, and I no longer want this in my life. And a lot of the people that I've made decisions to cut out is because in my relationship patterns, I consistently accommodated difficult personalities, strong personalities. I'm going to say difficult because they're not easy to get along with. They're very easy. People are very easily turned off by them for whatever the reasons are. And I just thought I was made to handle difficult personalities. My family is full of difficult personalities. So I thought I was made for that. But what I've realized is that it's not that I was made for that. Is I was conditioned in that environment to survive with difficult personalities. But that didn't mean I had to accept difficult personalities in my life. In trying to accommodate difficult personalities, in trying to make someone else feel comfortable in our relationship, what I did was sacrificed myself, and I was trying to manage their reactions and their personalities at the same time, not feeling seen. There was no space for me because I was always working for them. So cutting people out of my life, in that sense, it didn't mean that I disliked someone. It just meant that I now see this unhealthy pattern, and I've done my due diligence in trying to make it work. And it doesn't work anymore. I get to choose the relationships that are in my life. And I no longer choose relationships that require so much effort on my part to have space for. That's just the fact. If it requires work to put up boundaries and to make space for me and to be seen in my relationship, then I just don't want it anymore. And it doesn't mean I dislike someone. It just means this doesn't work for me. So I cut people out, and I cut people out for that reason. Now, in some scenarios, though, I don't cut people out, and I'm sure this is relatable for others. It's probably easier to cut friends out or romantic relationships out, but maybe it's not easy to cut out family. For some it is, right? But that could usually be a sticky point for someone, is you have a family member and you can't or won't cut them out, and you just have to figure out how to deal with it. And the way I deal with those types of relationships where I know someone is being a certain way is I just don't entertain it. And I don't entertain it in different ways. Sometimes I literally will ignore it. So if someone texts me like, hey, you're too busy to text now, or whatever, depending on my mood, I have said, well, your fingers work. I don't see the problem. That usually tends to lead to an argument, which tends to give me an opportunity to end the relationship. Those are relationships that were never really that close, usually romantic. In other circumstances, not entertaining it is I just literally pretend like I didn't hear it and I didn't read it. I don't feed into it. For example, going back to you're too busy to text me. Right, you're too busy for me now. What they want to hear is some elaborate apology on how you didn't prioritize them, basically. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to ignore it and be like, hey, what's up? Just pretend like it never happened. I've actually done that with someone. Just, hey, what's up? And then they brought it up again. They're like, oh, I just, you didn't respond to me. It's like, cool, yeah. So what's going on? Like, completely ignored. I'm not going to read into it. If you're not going to give me the benefit of the doubt, I'm not going to entertain your passive aggressiveness. The last way that I have handled guilt tripping and passive aggressiveness is that I've redirected back to the point. So literally have been in verbal conversation with someone and they throw a guilt tripping statement at me. And they're just like, I don't feel like I could trust you anymore. Over a situation that literally had nothing to do with them. They were making it about them, and their argument, I didn't follow. I didn't follow what we were even arguing about because it had nothing to do with them. And they just eventually said, I just feel like I can't trust you. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's how you feel. And they got mad. They got mad because I didn't defend myself. And I am of the mindset of I refuse to defend myself over something that is not true about me. Meaning, if you know me very well, you know me well enough to know that I am a trustworthy person, or that I'm not a selfish person, or that I am a kind person. If you know these things very well, like I believe you do, and you come out and say some blanket ass statement about my character versus keeping it very isolated to that situation, I'm not going to defend myself. That's bullshit. And so that usually pisses people off, but it's just kind of like, I know it's not true, and if that's what you think, okay, I'm not gonna try and change your mind. That's what you think, that's what you think. After all this time you've known me, if that's what you think, that's what you think. Go on your merry way. In this scenario, that upset them. And when it upset them, they were upset that I didn't defend them, and I literally called them out. I said, well, don't over exaggerate the situation here. You went from A to F, and that doesn't make sense. So what's the actual issue? So I brought it back and called them out, and it didn't necessarily stop this person's communication from being passive aggressive and guilt tripping, to be honest with you, because some people just cannot be changed. But I wasn't going to allow someone to alter my feelings when I knew the truth. I learned, like I said in the beginning of this episode, that I saw manipulation as a one-way thing, as someone who is out to get you in a negative way. And I didn't realize a lot of people in my life had very manipulative communication styles. It was all I knew. And it's very stressful living in that type of relationship where you can't express your feelings because you're trying to manage their response, knowing that you're going to end up feeling bad or you're going to be the bad guy. And it took a lot for me to understand that. And I'm sharing that in hopes that I've shed some light in some of your relationships, or maybe even your communication style if you're trying to do better, realizing how being passive aggressive and guilt tripping other people is actually very, very harmful in your relationships. I think the other takeaway that I want to leave you with is in recognizing that you don't have to have people in your life that communicate that way. You really don't have to. I'm not saying that there is this epitome of health that you can have in every part of your life, because every relationship does require work. But for me, the kind of work that I refuse to do in my relationships now is to communicate with someone who can't express their feelings in a healthy manner. So I cannot have someone in my life who every time they get upset, they raise their voice, they yell, they curse nonstop, they call me out my name, they guilt trip and manipulate. Those are my deal breakers. Conflict resolution, how you handle conflict, how you express feelings is a deal breaker of mine in my relationships, in all relationships. So you have permission to have a deal breaker and not entertain those people in your life on a close level. Doesn't mean they need to not be in your life at all, but in such a level that impacts you. You do not need to be close with everyone, and you do not need to accommodate all difficult personalities like I did. And if you like anything I said on this episode, don't forget to please subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends. And I will see you next week.